Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Joining us on our game day segment in just a moment is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. It's been just over a week since the B10 Presidents decided to cancel fall sports. In that time, we have heard from disappointed and angry football players and coaches, their parents, and of course you, the fans. They all have good reason to be upset. The Presidents really have dropped the ball and created their own public relations disaster. There was no transparency in the process of deciding if fall sports would be played or not. Not at any time were Big Ten coaches or players included in these discussions, even though they were the most affected by the decision. They really should have been. If the presidents and chancellors had at least reached out and included them, then maybe the backlash coming their way now could have at least been averted. We might not have liked their reasoning or their thought process, but at least we would have heard what led to this decision, and then you learn to accept it. Instead, we are at a stage where Big Ten players continue to band together in order for their voices to be heard. Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields started a petition drive earlier this week, asking the presidents to reverse their decision and reinstate football season. As of today, there are over 300,000 signatures. Big Ten parents have written their university presidents and Commissioner Kevin Warren asking for a meeting or for a better explanation as to why their sons can't play football. So far, they have not received any reply. I don't think any of us expect the presidents to reverse their decision at this point, but they do owe the coaches, players, and their parents an honest and frank reply to their valid questions. So for a lot of people, things are not happening fast enough. One of the fallouts is that a lot of redshirt juniors and seniors are going to have to make a decision. Are they going to play spring football? Are they coming back for the 2021 season? Or are they declaring for the NFL draft? Aaron McMann and I discussed in our interview today several Michigan players who are going to be impacted and have to make that kind of decision. After we taped yesterday, Jalen Mayfield, a redshirt junior, announced that he was declaring for the 2021 NFL draft because of the uncertainty, so I'm sure we're going to see more of that. My guest today says there are certainly more questions than answers right now when it comes to what's next for Michigan and Big Ten football. Joining me next is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive here on this week's edition of The Michigan Man. So stay with us. Here with us on our game day segment is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. And, we were hoping to be doing our preview shows at this time, Aaron, but it is what it is. So welcome aboard.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it seemed like I think last time I was on with you, we were discussing, not having a spring, whether the fall is going to happen. And
yeah,
now we're here in the fall, not having, no season. So it's been weird, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's been very weird. And it's only been a week since the Big Ten presidents decided to cancel all fall sports, not just football. In that time, we've heard arguments from fans and media in support of the decision, plenty who are not happy, and that includes many players. In recent days, though, Justin Fields from Ohio State started an online petition asking Big Ten leaders to reinstate football season. I don't think it's going to bear fruit, but it does have a lot of support, doesn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, it does. I think as of Monday morning, last I checked, it was at like 230,000 signatures or some. I'm sure it's approaching 300 now at this point. But yeah, he's got a lot of support behind it. The question, though, with that is how much of that is actual, player and coaching support. And anyone in theory could sign that thing. You and I can jump on there and put our names on there too. But since then, the last couple of days, we have seen a lot of parents of Big Ten football players come out in support of not only the petition, but their boys playing this fall. So there has been some groundswell of support. We saw that early on last week before the Big Ten decided to pull the plug on fall sports. But ultimately, I question whether it has any merit to it or it's going to make a difference. I mean, the Big Ten made their decision, and I'd find it hard to believe that they would kind of go back on what they already ruled.
Yeah, it's very hard to believe they would do that. As you mentioned, aside from the players and the petition that Justin Fields started, many Big Ten parents have written Commissioner Kevin Warren and many of their university presidents asking them to reverse last week's decision. I would think they, the Big Ten presidents, will sooner or later have to address these requests in some way publicly, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that seems to be the crux of what these parents want. They want meetings with their university presidents. They want meetings with Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren, like you said. They want really an explanation of why the season was actually canceled or postponed. They haven't really gotten one. Kevin Warren did go on Big Ten Network last week, and he talked a lot about uncertainty and, the health and safety challenges. And that's all, kind of been known for weeks and months now, but there was no just, concrete explanation. And I think more or less that's what a lot of these frustrated parents want. I can, going back to last week, it seemed like everyone I spoke to was just frustrated at the way the whole thing played out, from the lack of communication, the lack of transparency. I can remember texting with one notable Michigan football player last week, and he said he had no idea what was going on anymore. So it was just a weird situation. It continues to be with the Big Ten and the Pac-12, postponing fall. And then you have other conferences like the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC trying to move forward. So the Big Ten's an interesting situation right now. Kevin Warren has a lot of pressure on him. He made a decision. I would find it hard to believe that they would go back on that. But he's certainly got a lot of pressure from not only players and coaches, but parents as well.
No, there's no doubt about it. And, we're only a week removed, as we've been discussing, from this decision, and we still have no details as what helped them form their decision to cancel all sports. And it seems as if they left the heavy lifting to Commissioner Kevin Warren when it comes to dealing with the media and explaining what happened. And he really struggled publicly when I saw him speak. But, the presidents should have explained their reasoning immediately. We didn't have to like it. But if they would have, the backlash maybe wouldn't be what it is now, Aaron.
No, you're absolutely right. We got reports last week that there was some type of vote, made by the Big Ten presidents and chancellors. We got different vote totals and how things worked out. But then just yesterday, Penn State athletic director Sandy Barber came out and said that she wasn't aware of any votes. So it just seems like there's been a lack of communication across the board in the Big Ten from the top down, and that's how you get into these messes. When folks aren't communicating with one another, aren't telling them what's going on, things are kind of kept hidden. That's when things get people get frustrated and want answers, and I think that's what you're seeing right now. Now, to Kevin Warren's defense, him and the Big Ten presidents have been listening to a task force that they kind of put together back in March. It's a 14-person, unit made up of medical professionals spanning every institution in the Big Ten. So they're getting a lot of medical advice. I would presume that most of their decision was made based on the advice they're getting from medical professionals. So for them to, I think, go back and reverse their decision would require them to go fly in the face of what they've been told from the medical professionals. So it's like I said, I find it would be hard for me to believe that they go back now. But the way this whole thing has played out is obviously, at least publicly, has been a nightmare for the Big Ten.
Oh, absolute debacle. I mean, if they would have just from the start, as we've been saying, come out, because we're talking about all the medical advice that they have, and we assume that's what they were listening to. But then you have people like Aiden Hutchinson's dad, who's an ER doctor at Beaumont, and a lot of other medical people saying, we're not so sure about the numbers. We're leaning more towards liability, that there were lawyers in these rooms too. But you know what? Either way, however they came to that decision, by just talking about it, you could clear the air.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the thing no one really wants to talk about. But these schools are concerned about lawsuits, and rightfully so. I mean, we've seen these schools get sued for other things before. So if a kid was to get sick or hospitalized, or perhaps God forbid, even worse, these schools know they'd be on the hook for a lot of money. So they are. I'm sure they're hearing from their lawyers too. They're getting legal counsel and everything else. And at the end of the day, I would presume that was a big factor in all this. It's interesting you brought up Chris Hutchinson, Aiden Hutchinson's father, because he's the one that's kind of leading, as I understand, he's the one leading Michigan's football parents in their group. They came out with a statement yesterday, asking for meetings with Mark Schlissel, the university president, Kevin Warren, and they're also asking for a reversal this season. So it's a weird situation. Lawsuits are obviously play a factor. You got the medical advice coming in. It's really a smorgasbord of things.
Well, like most fans, I don't like it. Media guys don't like it, but there is not going to be football this year. I'm trying to wrap my head around that, even as of this morning. So what to do next really becomes the question. And actually, there are a lot of questions, starting with spring football. Purdue coach Jeff Brom released a plan for a spring season of 8 games to be followed by a 10-game season in the fall. Do you think there is even a remote chance something like that takes place, Aaron?
Yeah, I think they could try and swing it. I think you're going to get some pushback from some folks. You know, there have been critics on from everywhere pointing to maybe the inability of playing 2 seasons that close together, just because of the grind and the potential toll it would take on these athletes. But I do think if they do play this spring and follow up in the fall, I think you're going to see two different seasons and 2 different programs with these Big Ten teams. I think the spring is interesting because should they play again, there's going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of players that either won't choose to sit out, won't play, won't be on the team. So is it feasible? Yes, I do think so. But there are certainly a lot of challenges. I mean, the Big Ten tries to play in the winter, spring. You got to deal with the weather. You got to deal with scheduling issues and everything else. So there's a lot going on. I do think it's possible. I do think they're going to try to. They're going to try and recoup some of this revenue they lost by not having a fall football season, because some of these athletic departments stand to lose, upwards of $50, $75, $100 million, depending on where they're at in their football programs. But so I do think they're going to try and get some of that money back. But again, and I said this back in the summer, and I'll say it now, or early summer, and I'll say it now. If the situation remains similar now when it comes to coronavirus as it does in December, January, I find it hard to believe that they'll be able to justify and explain the difference in allowing their athletes to play.
As I said, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered. Eligibility is one of those for seniors or redshirt juniors, and I would think that question has to be addressed relatively soon, wouldn't you, Aaron?
Yeah, the NCAA brought it up last week, and I think they're going to try and do that here in the next couple of weeks, because some of these kids, they need an answer before they make a decision on whether they decide to leave for the NFL or not. You got specifically to Michigan. I mean, you got upwards of half a dozen to a dozen guys who could potentially leave for the NFL next year, and they're going to have to weigh what they want to do, because if the Big Ten decides to play in the spring, it's really going to screw up things with the NFL, because the draft obviously is in April. They got the Senior Bowl at the end of January. They got the Combine at the end of February, early March. A lot of those guys who could potentially be draft eligible would want to participate in those events. So that would mean they would have to skip their spring season, or at least weigh playing or not. And if the Big Ten can potentially pull off, a spring season, maybe late winter, early spring, it could give some of these guys the potential of still playing. So, yeah, a lot of questions have to be answered. And then you got obviously the fall. You got guys who maybe want an extra year of eligibility, and you got guys who are going to come in recruit-wise. They're going to come in January, enroll early, and it's going to add to the scholarship limit on some of these rosters. So, yeah, the NCAA has a lot to answer. I think they realize that. They know that. And that should be determined here in the next few weeks, I think.
Well, we hope so anyway. But as you mentioned, it is an NFL dilemma for quite a few Michigan players, which I think rules spring ball out for a lot of them. Let's take a look at some of those Michigan players facing that decision and get your thoughts on, maybe which way they'll go, Aaron. And let's start with Nico Collins, who, man, I was so looking forward to seeing him this year. Todd McShay of ESPN has him right now as the number 18 pick in the mock draft. Nothing gained by him playing spring ball, is there, Aaron?
No. Not only were you looking forward to seeing him, but I know Josh Gaddis was too.
Yeah.
Josh was raving about him to us a couple of months ago. I think he said he ran a 4.40 back in January, so he was in the best shape of his life. He was 100% injury-free. He was as healthy as he's ever been, Josh Gaddis said, and he was looking forward to seeing him play. But yeah, Nico's, I think, one of those guys who will declare for the draft. I think no questions asked. He was in decent shape last year. I think he could have potentially gotten drafted last year. Problem with him is he hadn't put together a full season. The wide receiver class was packed, but he's got, the ability and the frame to go now. And I think he potentially, like Todd McShay said, I think he could be an early round draft pick, absolutely.
And then you have Jalen Mayfield. Even though he has started just one season, he too is being projected already by Todd McShay as a possible first round pick in 21. and he's only a junior. That is a tough call for a kid like Jalen when there really isn't a lot of tape on you, Aaron.
No, it is. He's interesting because he's being projected based off of projections. I mean, they thought he would, he'd be able to put together a full season on tape again this year. And if he posted, a season like he did last year, improved a little bit, the sky was the limit for him. Like you said, Mel Kiper was raving about him, Tom McShay's been raving about him, but it was all on projection. So I think he's got an interesting decision to make, especially if there is a spring season that could potentially get, because he's still got 2 years of eligibility left, so he could potentially play spring and then the next fall, and then enter the NFL draft in 2022. So he's more interesting. I think for him at least, from a cautionary tale, I suspect he probably wait. But then again, you never know. If teams are telling him they like him and his ceiling, he could potentially go. But he's going to be, I think, the most interesting name to watch.
Another guy Mel Kiper just raved about this summer was defensive end Kwity Paye. Scouts seem to think he needed a senior year to boost his stock, though. He's one of those kids whose future is really muddied because of no season, isn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, he's another guy who could probably benefit from another eligibility. But the same token, too, I have to believe he's gonna weigh whether to go. I mean, he could seriously consider. I would not be surprised if he decides to declare for the draft. I think he could probably get into the Senior Bowl and some of those events without this season. So he's going to be more, I think he's leaning more towards going, I would say. But again, he's another guy that could come back. He could potentially, and if the eligibility is extended, he might be able to play in both the spring and the fall. So that's going to be interesting to watch. Yeah, he had a really breakout. I thought he had a breakout year 2019. He played really well. Coaching staff liked him. It helped kind of shoot up his stock. But I think he probably loses the most by not having a fall. But I do think if he does declare for the draft, he'll certainly get acknowledged. His stock will be high, and he could probably be a mid-round guy.
And then there's Aiden Hutchinson. He's another one. CBS has him as a possible first-round choice. That was if he made a leap this season. Now, he and his dad say they have to consider everything out there, everything that's on the table. I'm not sure he's ready, but he could be gone too.
Yeah, he's in a similar situation, I think, as Kwity. I mean, they both started most of 2019. They played well. They got him, the board for many folks. But again, he'll have to be another guy that's going to weigh and kind of, figure out where his stock lands. He'll have to, and again, he's another guy that is hurt by a lack of a fall season. So same thing as Kwity. I think he could go. In fact, he may go. But it's going to come down to, I think, what he's being told and where he kind of projects himself in a 2021 draft.
And what makes you sort of grind your teeth about not having the season, Aaron, is just three of these kids we've mentioned so far, Aiden Hutchinson, Jalen Mayfield, Nico Collins, are all projected by a lot of these services as first-round picks. It just makes you realize, man, how much talent we had. 3 first-round picks, that would be amazing.
Yeah, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I thought Michigan's defense could have been very good this year. Another top 5, I think, unit from Don Brown. The secondary was, I think, talented too. You got a couple guys there with question marks. Ambry Thomas and Brad Hawkins, who could potentially go. So it's Michigan's got, and I said this last week when the decision was made to cancel, but this Michigan team, if they were to play in the spring, can look very different from the team we expected in the fall. So it's going to be interesting next couple of months. The NCAA, whether what they do with eligibility is going to be key for some of these guys. But a lot of decisions, not only in Michigan but across the country, these guys who have had their fall season wiped out.
No, absolutely. And another kid we just mentioned, Ambry Thomas, his dad says no spring ball for him. So that would mean to me he's definitely gone. Another kid with all the tools, but again, not having that big senior year, which really could have boosted him up in the draft.
Again, he had a really good year considering his medical issues last year. I think he surprised some folks just based on how he came out right away and played. Yeah, he's a talented kid. He was able to bulk up a little bit, and I think that was, his size was a little bit of a question mark, but he was able to, I think, answer that. And if he was able to put together a complete fall, I think it would have done wonders for his stock going into 2021. So again, he's another guy with a decision. He could sit out the spring and maybe choose to play next fall because he's got another year eligibility. But we'll see. I mean, it's interesting. A lot of these kids have unique situations, unique decisions to make. Because some, we're going into their senior year, some were redshirts, have a couple years eligibility left, but at high stock. So it's something we've never seen before. So I think each kid's gonna have to make, or each player's gonna have to make a decision on their own, and certainly whether or not a spring season happens is going to be a factor. Absolutely.
No, absolutely. And another kid I feel sorry for is Nick Eubanks. Had a really nice junior season. A lot of people said it was a breakout year, 25 catches. But for draft purposes, he probably is another one of, I guess, what are many of them that needed to follow that up with a big season this year. But still, I would be surprised if he stuck around for spring ball, wouldn't you, Aaron?
Yeah, you're right. He needed, I think, fall 2020 to kind of solidify his stock. The good thing for him, though, is he's got good size. He's another one of those, I think, NFL, sized tight ends that come out of Michigan. We've seen them, the last couple of years kind of get drafted year after year, and I think that'll be the case for him. He's got decent hands. He can move well. He can block. And that's key at the NFL level, as we know. So, whether or not he decides to move on, and I presume he will, I think he'll get a look at by the NFL team, absolutely.
Well, while the Big Ten and the Pac-12 fans gnash their teeth this fall, unless something changes, which we doubt, the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC are right now planning to play football. The SEC is announcing, I think, the remainder or their full schedule today. We're taping on Wednesday morning. If they get the season started, and let's say it goes fairly well, a lot of folks seem to think that is really going to hurt the other conferences in a lot of ways, Aaron. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think just from a PR standpoint, it's going to look bad for the the Big Ten and the Pac-12. Maybe not so much for the MAC and the Mountain West, because I think the MAC stood to lose just a lot financially. And so, but the Big Ten is unique because, and Big Ten and Pac-12 are unique because not only they expected to play football this fall, but they kind of figured into the whole college football playoff system and the bowl system and everything else. So it would look bad, certainly from a PR standpoint. But again, I do think Kevin Warren was acting out of and the university presidents were acting out of what they believed was the best possible scenario. So I'm curious to see what happens should these conferences play football and play a full season, how that impacts the postseason, because the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are a big part of that. And if the playoff decides to go forward in December or January, it's obviously not going to include those two conferences. So what they do in the spring will be interesting. But not only that, but there's also recruiting repercussions from this and things like that. I mean, you're going to see teams in the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 kind of use this against the Big 10 when they're recruiting players that may be getting offers from those schools. So there's a lot of from a public standpoint, it looks bad. From a PR standpoint, it looks bad. But it remains to be seen too whether these three conferences can complete a full season. I remain skeptical. I don't know if they're going to be able to. We're already seeing reports from campuses across the country that have started classes, that breakouts are happening. UNC, Chapel Hill, in fact, on I think Monday, announced that they were going from an in-class semester to completely online because of so many COVID breakouts. So I remain skeptical whether they're going to finish the season. They're probably going to start it. But nonetheless, it's going to be interesting next month or two, I think, to follow.
Oh, yes, it will. I saw footage over the weekend. Alabama had move-in weekend in Tuscaloosa this past weekend, and they were showing the parties in downtown Tuscaloosa, and not a mask to be seen. I mean, throngs of students just partying, and the athletic director at Alabama tweeted, "Do you want to have football this fall? Wear your mask." So it is going to be interesting to see if these kids get in lockstep, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's difficult because college sports aren't, like the NBA or the NFL in some regards, and there's no bubble. I mean, these kids are obviously they're for the most part only dealing with their teammates and practicing in the the football facilities. But what happens when they go back to their apartment or, have a bye week and decide to go out for the bar or whatever the case may be and congregate with some of their classmates? I mean, that's when issues arise. The virus could spread, and that's when teams get quarantined. So it's, you can't control these kids. That's the thing. You can't put them in a bubble that's been determined to this point. So in a way, it's kind of it's going to be a free for all. It's going to basically come down to the teams that are the most disciplined, and they're able to kind of, stay within the parameters of what the teams have told them. Most of the Big Ten teams are able to do that up to this point, and you look at where the Big Ten went. So I don't know. I'm skeptical whether the college football season can finish. But I guess for now, we'll be able to enjoy at least a few games in early September and October, hopefully.
I'm skeptical too, but at least those conferences, the ACC, the Big 12, the SEC, they gave themselves some cushion with a start date of September 26th, which, still gives them time to rethink this whole situation, see how it develops, and cancel if they have to, which still, as we've just said, that could very easily happen, Aaron.
Yeah, and the Big Ten in a way could have done the same thing. I thought that when they rolled out their schedule a couple of weeks back, I thought they provided for a lot of flexibility. Now, granted, they were planning to start the weekend of September 5th, so it was an earlier start, but they easily could have moved that back a couple of weeks and shifted the schedule, given all the kind of the open weeks that they built into it. They chose not to go that route. I'm still wondering why exactly. That hasn't been communicated. But we are where we are. The Big Ten made its decision, as far as we know, and football, at least in the Big Ten, won't be played this fall.
Well, a lot of us have been surprised at the NCAA's lack of involvement in the last couple of weeks in this whole process. We have heard very little in the last few weeks from them, haven't we, Aaron?
Yeah, and I think that's where the frustration is coming the most from these athletic departments and the conferences and even the players and coaches. I mean, you got folks, I think, that are frustrated over the lack of leadership from the top. And I think that's where perhaps maybe some type of, commissioner of college football maybe would have come into play here. But the NCAA made it pretty clear from the get-go that they were going to set guidelines for some guidelines, at least, for recruiting and testing and that type of thing. But there was real no leadership in terms of a season. They were kind of going to leave it up to the individual conferences and states. And some may say that was the right way to go because different states were dealing with different situations. But when you got some conferences deciding to play in the fall and some not, it just doesn't look good. It's just kind of everything's kind of whimsical. It's out there, and I think that's where you're going to see, should the fall, this fall season get underway in the SEC, ACC, and Big 12, that's when the lack of leadership from the top and the decision to kind of move forward in lockstep is going to hurt the playoff system and the bowl system. I think you're going to see some bowl games decide not to go forward this year. They may not be able to financially. They just won't have the number of teams available. So that's, and that's where we're at. That's why we're at. I think we're at right now. And then the frustration's boiled over. We just heard from the Big Ten. Obviously, folks are mad at the commissioner and the individual presidents, but I think a lot of this could have been missed if there's leadership at the top of the NCAA, and there just hasn't been a ton of that over the last few months.
As of this morning, we still have more questions than answers when it comes to why there is no Big Ten football. As we've said at the top, we have to accept that this fall is going to be really unlike any we have known in our lives, and that's whether you're 18 or you're 80. None of us have experienced a fall without Big Ten football. It is going to be a huge hole in fans' lives and broadcasters and beat writers and podcasters. It is going to be so weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my fall. It's going to be, I've covered football to some degree for the better part of the last 10 years. From when I was in college at Central Michigan, I covered the team there, to I've covered Michigan for the last 4 or 5. It's going to be different. Especially if there's some college football on TV, and the Big Ten isn't playing, because I think if you had asked me at the beginning of all this, maybe back in the spring, I think I would have said the Big Ten would have been maybe one of the last conferences to decide to cancel. So it's a unique situation we're all trying to grapple with and deal with. I can tell you the coaches are just as frustrated as some of the fans out there. The players are frustrated. So it's going to be an interesting next couple of months to see whether these other conferences decide to follow the Big Ten and the Pac-12, and if not, how successful or unsuccessful they end up being.
Well, final question for you, Aaron. As we've been talking about no fall sports, we have no idea yet what will happen with winter sports. That has to be broached. And as much as I hate to say this, next fall could be far from normal too. We just don't know. And I wonder, how long will it take for football to bounce back? Will it take a vaccine? Will it take fans years to feel safe in big crowds? Do you think it will take years for college sports to get back to near where it was before COVID-19?
I think it's certainly possible. I can remember back in the spring we were talking about whether the season would happen in the fall, and now we're here now talking about whether football can happen in the spring. There hasn't been a ton that's changed in the last few months. The virus is still out there. It's still spreading across the United States. It may not be heavy in where, heavy in areas like New York and Michigan, like it was, a few months ago, but it's still spreading. And I think until we get a vaccine or until we get some type of breakthrough to try and limit the spread of the virus, I don't think college football will be the way it was last fall for a couple of years. Now, does that mean that they don't play next fall? I don't know. I think they could try and give it a shot. But to play football again and pack the big house of 100,000 people, I think it may be a few more years. Absolutely.
No, I agree with that. So we'll just have to wait and see. Day to day, week to week, things change. So we will just keep doing pandemic podcasts and stories until we get some good news or there's a vaccine. We can just hope and pray. Our guest on our game day segment has been beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Always a pleasure, Aaron. I wish we were talking about preseason, but we will get together later in the fall and see what's happening on the news front. But as always, we appreciate your time. Take care of yourself, and we look forward, as always, to that next visit.
You too, Mike.
Thanks again to beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive for joining us today. As you know, we are back on our weekly program schedule now. If life was normal, we would be bringing you our season preview shows, but nothing is normal right now. So we will stay with our weekly schedule for now and bring you the latest news and information on Michigan and Big Ten athletics each week. And we hope soon that we will have something positive to share with you on what is next for Michigan football and even winter sports. That is the next decision that the NCAA and the Big Ten, all conferences, actually have to make. The crossover sports like hockey, basketball, volleyball, what are we going to do? So stay tuned. I do thank you for joining me and hope you'll tell your Michigan friends and family about the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!